What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third person and action RPG tutorial series, we're going to be going over the intro to dialogue. What I'm calling dialogue here is dialogue choices, so like we can choose what we want to say in response to something an NPC said, or maybe just an actual choice in the game, like if we want to go left or go right, if there's some sort of branch in the path, how we accomplish this mission. And today's episode is all about setting the UI up for it. So I have a vertical box that has a generic number of elements that we can adjust to our liking. And when we hover over them, it is going to clearly show that this is the choice that we are picking. When we pick one, the other two options are going to fade away, and then this one will fade away after a couple seconds. Now, it's not hooked up to anything. It doesn't actually determine any in-game logic, but of course this is just the start. We will be going over that and actually adjusting the text on the dialogue choice to, of course, represent what it is that we are choosing. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's episode. If you're interested in getting caught up in the rest of the series before you check this out, such as how we've done our inventory system, rolling, and attacking enemies, you can go ahead and click this icon in the top right corner right here to check all that behavior out. Now, alternatively, if you don't care about that stuff, but you just care about the dialogue choice, I do recommend you watch this episode right here, which is where we initially went over NPC interactions, and we are going to be incorporating these dialogue choices with our NPC behavior. So I would highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with that content going forward. But with all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. I'm going to be doing everything in the blueprints today because we're mainly going to be focusing on the UI for the dialogue choices. So I'm going to go to my blueprints, my widgets. I want to make two new widgets today. I want to make one for my dialogue choice, my individual choice, and one for the overall menu. All my choices as well as additional UI that may be present when dialogue is there, such as a timer or a stat check to see if we can actually get away with that dialogue choice. Something you might have seen in a lot of RPGs. So add user interface widget blueprint. If you're in Unreal Engine 4, this will be enough, but if you're in Unreal Engine 5, you will have to pick the parent class. In this case, I'm just going to use the default common user widget class. Of course, if you have one that you would prefer for any reason, feel free to do that, but user widget is good enough for me. So click this, it will create a widget. I've done this twice. I have one for dialogue choice item and choice menu, like I mentioned. Let's go to the individual item first. So the dialogue choice item is the individual dialogue choice. In this case, I have my default canvas panel that comes when you make a widget in Unreal Engine 4. If you are in Unreal Engine 5, you are not going to have a canvas panel by default, but you can add one simply by searching for canvas panel in the palette section and just dragging it onto the root element of the widget. Now this canvas panel is simply the size of the screen. I haven't changed anything else about it, so if you look at all the settings on the right, they're all the default settings. Now it's time to make the actual choice itself. So in my case, I'm going to use a button and some text. The button is going to be what the player actually hovers over and presses or selects with a keyboard or controller, and the text is going to represent the dialogue for what that choice actually is. You can find the button widget right here. Drag it into your canvas panel, and we have item button. So I renamed this to item button, and I made sure it was a variable because we are going to be using it within the blueprint. I left the anchors the same and just updated the size. Again, this widget isn't determining the location of the dialogue choices. The menu itself is, which we're going to be getting to. So you can leave this alone for locations, but make sure your size is right, the size that you want to make these dialogue choices. So I used 800 by 80. For the style, I updated the normal, hovered, and pressed to use the images that I want. So I made this image menu list item. So this is what it looks like when you're not hovering over it. And hovered is menu list item hovered. So this is what it looks like when you are hovering over it. It's this lighter color. Pressed I haven't done anything with yet, but we will go over that later in the series. We are going to allow presses today. We're just not going to modify the actual appearance of it. Feel free to do so if you have an image for it right now. The rest of this is basic button behavior. I haven't changed any of it. Then we can add a text element to our button, which will make it a child of the button, just like this. I've called this text dialogue text and made sure it was a variable because we are going to need to change this text to whatever the dialogue choice represents. We can't do that in today's episode, so it's okay if you don't make it a variable, but we're going to need to anyway. So we might as well do it now. I set my alignment to be the center for both the horizontal and the vertical, so as it gets longer, of course, it will stretch out and fill this, but if it's shorter, it will just be centered within the button. For the text, I just manually wrote dialogue choice just so we know what it represents right now. Here are my font options, but you can pick whatever you want. I have my outline size as 2 just because I like the way that looks. And that's the rest of my text widget there. Let's go and make the dialogue choice menu before going into the graph, just so that we have everything ready. So our other widget is the menu. And I've added a canvas panel to this one. Again, if you're in Unreal Engine 4, you won't need to add it. It will spawn there by default. You can see all the settings for it here, but I haven't changed any. It should be the default values. But the dialogue choice vertical box is something I added and changed. So if we search our palette for vertical box and drag that into the canvas panel, we'll get this right here. It's not filled in with anything at the current time, so it doesn't really look like it does anything. But we're going to add our dialogue choice items to it, and it will make a nice result in the end. So I left the anchors, the position, and the size alone. Instead, I checked size to content because I want to size to the children elements, which are those individual dialogue choices. The other settings for it are default, but make sure you name it and make it a variable so that we can access it in the blueprint. So I called it dialogue choice vertical box and made it a variable. Now, if we go into the dialogue choice item, we want to click on the item button and we want to scroll down to the events at the bottom. I'm going to handle the on pressed, on hovered, and on unhovered events for the button. So when we hover over it, we can do something, unhover, we can do something, and press it, we can do something. Press counts as a click, or if you've selected it with a gamepad or controller. So if we go to the graph, after pressing the plus on hovered, for example, it will bring you to this section, this event right here. What I want to do is play an animation that I'm calling slide out button. So I'm going to hover over this and the button's going to slide to the right. To do that, I'm going to need an animation, so I can go to my designer, I can go to my animations tab. You might not have this if you're in Unreal Engine 4. If not, you can go to Window, Animations. And that will also work if it's missing in your Unreal Engine 5. But either way, go to Animations and add a new animation. For the first one, I have Slide Out Button, which is that slide to the right that I mentioned. In here, I want to add a track, and we're going to track all name widgets for item button. Now, I can't see the actual selection that I want here. I want just item button, not item button as a canvas panel slot. Technically, that would work, but I prefer just item button for what we're doing here. But since I've already selected it, you can't see it. Just look for the one that just says the name of your button. Once you do that, you'll get this option here, and then you'll be able to press plus track on that button itself, like this, to select the type of animation you want to perform, and I selected transform. Now, once you have this here, you can open it up by pressing this down arrow, or the right arrow, to expand it and collapse it. And to slide it to the right, we're going to need a translation on the x-axis. So I'm going to open up translation as well, then look at the x-axis field. For those of you that aren't too familiar with Sequencer, basically this is your timeline. This is the number of seconds that you're going to have pass. This highlighted view is the length or the duration of the animation. These little red circles are keys, and these are useful because we can interpolate data between those times. So in what you're seeing here in this example, I have 0 to 0.25 seconds. And you can see I have a key on 0 seconds and 0.25 seconds. And I want to move the button 40 units to the right in that time. Now, Unreal is going to do the work for us as long as we set this up. So basically at 0 seconds, you can move this by using the little scrubber here. At 0 seconds, we want to add a key right here on the X translation. We'll get this dot. Then we go to 0.25 seconds and add another key, but this time we change the value from 0 on the X to 40 on the X. Of course, if I wanted more, I could make it 80, and you'll see that Unreal does the work for us, and it moves it out farther. 40's fine, so I'm going to change it back, but use the values you want for your game. So not so bad. I want to add another animation while we're in here as well, so I'm going to make this one fade button. This is when you've made your choice, the options fade away. So I'm going to press plus animation. I called this one fade button. For the track, I use the item button again, but for the track on the button, I've used the render opacity. Now this one I have going from 0 to 1 second. At 0 seconds, the render opacity has a key with a value of 1.0, so fully opaque, not transparent. We can't see through it. But 1 second in, we have another key, and the render opacity is 0, meaning it's fully transparent, or it's faded away completely. So those are our animations. Now when you make an animation, you'll automatically be able to grab it in the graph of this widget. So if we go back into the graph, we have our onHovered event, and now I want to go to my variables section and animations and pull my slide out button here. I can get it and call play animation on it. Now from here it's pretty simple. Most of the stuff can be left alone, so my startup time is 0. I want to just leave it as default. I only need it to play once, I don't need it to loop. Play mode is forward, we don't need to play in reverse or go back and forth, we just want to play the animation one time. Speed of 1 is fine, and we don't need to restore state. This is to kind of reset things on the widget when the animation is finished. So here's our onHovered. Now, if you added the onUnhovered event as well by clicking on the button and going to onUnhovered, you can play the same animation again, but this time we're going to use play mode reverse to play it backward. So it's going to slide from the right to the left. Now we have onPressed, which is the big one for today's episode. It's very simple still, but it's more involved than these other ones. So let's go to hide choice. Hide choice is a custom event that I made, so let's go ahead and type add custom event. When you get this, you can rename it to whatever you want. I called it hide choice. In here, we're going to play our fade button. So when we're hiding the choice, we're going to make the button invisible. And we have the animation for that. That's our fade button animation. So we get that. We call play animation on it. All the settings I left as default. Now don't worry about this or the red line right now. We're going to go over that in a few minutes. As long as you have those 3 other events in here, you're good to go for the current time. Let's jump over to our dialog choice menu. Now let's go to the graph in here. In here, the first thing we want to have is event construct. So event construct will be in the widget by default, but if you removed it, or for whatever reason it's not there, you can simply search for event construct, and you'll get this node here. Now in here I'm doing something hard-coded because we don't have a way to determine how many dialog choices we actually want. This is something that will likely be dynamic between interactions. So if you're talking to an NPC and they have 5 dialog choices, then you would want to add 5 elements of those choices. But you might be on a branching path and you only have 2 choices, so you only want 2 elements in the vertical box. So for now, I've done one piece of logic and just copied that 3 times over. It's temporary only, so however you do it is fine. You don't have to make it super clean or anything. Let's just make sure we can get everything working in here. Then when we fill it out with actual data, this will of course be updated. So what I've done here is create the dialog choice item widget. So create widget. For the class, we choose dialog choice item. Now in here, you'll see this owning widget. That's not something we covered. To handle that, we should go back to the dialog choice item widget and make a new variable, plus variable. And I've called this one owning widget. It is of type dialog choice menu type, so this widget's type. Basically, it's the owning widget of this item. That way we know A, that it's valid and that we have a menu, but B, that we can call functions on it, because some things that we do on the individual item are going to affect the overall menu. Such as when we click on one of the individual buttons, we want all of them to fade away. Make sure this is instance editable and expose on spawn so that when the dialog choice menu spawns them, it can automatically set itself as the owning widget. That's what we're doing here. So owning widget is going to be a reference to self. Now we're going to get our dialog choice vertical box, and we're going to call add child to vertical box, and we want to add the return value of the created widget and connect those. So that's what I have here. Now I literally copied this and just pasted it 3 times. That way we would have 3 elements in our vertical box. At this point we want to add another event, and this one is going to be called dialog chosen. So we right click, add custom event, and I've called this one dialog chosen. This time I've added a new parameter, so plus input, and I've called it chosen item, and it's of type dialog choice item, which is the individual widget that we just made. It's an object reference to that. To find it, you can just do dialog choice item, object reference. Additionally, I didn't show the menu earlier, but whenever you want to make a variable of the menu, you just look at dialog choice menu and then select object reference. Now, essentially what we want to do here is determine what object was chosen or selected by the user and hide all the others. So simply, we're going to grab the dialog choice vertical box, get all children, loop through this array so that we can grab each individual child, and cast it to a dialog choice item, because if there are other children in the vertical box, we don't want to do the same behavior with them as we do with the individual items. And that's what you see here. Now, I want to make sure that the chosen item doesn't fade away at the same time as the non-chosen items to make a clear distinction for the user. So I'm going to drag off the cast and type not equal or exclamation mark equal. And this input parameter is going to be passed into the other option. So if the cast is not equal to the parameter, we drag off of this into a branch. And that's what you see here. Accidentally deleted that pin, so go ahead and fix that up. Now what we want to do is call hide choice on this individual item if the branch returns true. So hide choice. Again, only if it returns true. Now we have our dialog chosen function or event here. Let's go back to the dialog choice item, scroll down to onPressed again, and let's handle this. Remember, onPressed comes from the buttons onPressed event right here. Now in this event, we want to call our new dialog chosen event. So to do that, we're going to get our owning widget, and we're going to right click on it and convert that to a validated get. That way we only do this if it is valid. If there is no owning widget for whatever reason, I'm actually not going to do dialog chosen. I want to remove this from the parent. Basically, I'm saying there should be an owning widget, but there's not. So since there's not, let's just get rid of this item. And you'll notice I'm removing self from parent. Just calling remove from parent. This is because we want to remove the individual item, not the menu. Otherwise, though, if it is valid, we're going to drag off of it and call dialog chosen. And for the chosen item, we're in self because that's the button that was pressed. So pass self in. At this point, it will be working, but we can make it a little bit nicer by hiding this choice after a few seconds have passed. So after the dialog chosen is called, I'm going to call setTimerByEvent to hide this individual choice as well. SetTimerByEvent. Now the way this works is you can pass it an event. You can either make one, point to one, or just use this actual delegate section here, plug it in. And once the time that you put into this section runs out, so in the example here, I have 2 seconds. So once 2 seconds is up, it will call hide choice. It's a little bit safer than a delay because a delay actually stops the logic until that happens, whereas this just sets the timer off, continues the logic, and then once this time is finished, we'll call this event. Now, additionally, I've decided I'm actually not going to just remove this from parent on is not valid. I'm also going to hide it. Originally, I was thinking of that as a failsafe mechanic. However, hiding it like this probably will look better even in the case of a failsafe. So under either circumstance, I'm going to hide the choice after 2 seconds. At this point, we just have to determine how to spawn it to the screen. Now, normally this would be involved with the actual interactions, the progression in a conversation with an NPC or at some specific story element. We don't have that set up yet, so we really just need to be able to test this. Because of that, I'm going to add it to the level blueprint, but we're not going to keep it that way. In Unreal Engine 5, the level blueprint is accessed by going to this graph icon and then selecting Open Level Blueprint. In Unreal Engine 4, there will be a button up here that says Blueprints. You select that and then go to Open Level Blueprint. In the level blueprint, we want Event Begin Play. And I already have this because I have this cutscene logic for one of my other episodes that I've done. None of this logic is required if you followed the cutscene episodes. That's perfect. You'll already have it. If not, you can go ahead and skip this. The only things you actually need are right here. So in Begin Play, I'm creating my dialog choice menu widget. Again, this is done by calling create widget. Selecting the class of dialog menu right here. and then calling add to viewport to put it on the player screen. Just plug that in and begin play, and you'll be good to go. So now if we test this, we can select an option. Everything should fade away properly. Anyway, guys, that is my initial setup for the dialogue and choice menu system. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. If you want to support the channel further and get extra benefits along the way, feel free to check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions, like a lot of you kind souls already have. You guys being so excited for these series week after week makes me incredibly excited about them as well. So thank you so much for all the love and support. If you ran into any trouble with this episode or any of my episodes, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and I'd be happy to help you out. Otherwise, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.